In today's news, face-to-face learning to resume from next Monday for a special category of students, then on January 31st for all students.
The Honorable Shreen Flax Charles represents the BVI at a OECS Multisector meeting on Omicron.
And preliminary police investigations indicate no foul play in the sudden death of 31-year-old East End resident.
The legal fraternity over the Caribbean celebrates the opening of the 2022 law year of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court.
And 2 businesses fined and ordered to close following COVID-19 breaches, and total active COVID-19 cases in the BVI on the decline, with 473 recoveries reported on Friday. Viewers, these and more stories when 284 News return.
The wait is over. CCT Fire is here. Experience ultra-fast downloads, seamless streaming, and even more reliable connectivity on an all-new fire-blazing super-fast CCT Fiber network. CCT Fire. Bring it home and upgrade today.
Hello viewers, thank you so much for sticking with us and welcome to 284 News. It is Monday, January 17th, 2022. We're coming to you live and direct out of Tortola in the Virgin Islands. I'm Ron Grant.
And viewers, I'm Kamal Haynes, and we start today's newscast on the subject of education, where we see face-to-face learning is set to resume across public schools within the territory over the next 2 weeks, starting with select categories, then all students from January 31st. Well, this was the announcement made by the Deputy Premier and Minister for Education, Dr. Natalia Wheatley, during an interview on Tola Radio on Monday, January 17th. Well, he said starting next week, Monday, students with special needs will be among the category of students allowed to re-enter the classrooms physically.
On the 24th, we're going to have smaller groups come in, those with special needs and some other special categories that we want to get in, starting from next week, Monday. And what we're going to do as well, on the following week, on the 31st, we're going to resume face-to-face for everyone.
Well, Dr. Wheatley said he is aware of the challenges faced by some students with the online learning platform, which put those students at a disadvantage. Well, he said the decision to return to face-to-face comes after consultation with the BVI Health Services Authority, who agreed to the decision once COVID cases continue to decline.
Let me just say, Heritage, that I know it's difficult. This spike that we had is very disruptive to our different institutions like school, disruptive to business, disruptive to everybody. When people catch COVID-19, they have to go home. That includes, teachers, that includes students. Of course, it's our duty to ensure that persons remain safe as well.
Yes,
So we took a recommendation from the health services in terms of online for a period, but we recognize that some students are disadvantaged by that. Not all the students, but some of the students are disadvantaged by that. And we want to have face-to-face learning as quickly as it is safe to do so. And in discussions with the health services, we've come up with a date to resume our face-to-face sessions, and we'll just say, God's willing, that our numbers continue to decrease.
But meanwhile, the Education Minister also revealed that there will be a press conference held this Wednesday to update the public on how his ministry intends to roll out the COVID-19 testing regime in public schools in the BVI. But the minister did not release much information on the details of the testing regime, but assured residents that mass testing of students is not on the cards. Ron, this is obviously somewhat of a backtrack from what was initially announced regarding the testing regime. But here we see the minister basically announcing a resumption of face-to-face learning, something that a lot of residents would have been calling for, considering that school would have resumed last week. And, the announcement of returning to online learning would have sparked somewhat of a disruption amongst residents across the territory. But now we're hearing that, following the situation where we see somewhat of a decline in COVID cases here in the BVI, the minister basically announcing once that continues, plans are basically set to resume to face-to-face learning.
Kamal, you are absolutely right. Within the past a few weeks, there have been quite a bit of conversations and calls from not only parents and teachers themselves, but community persons who are calling for face-to-face learning only because it seems would appear that it's causing much of an injustice to students, especially, like the minister says, the ones who have a difficult time with the online services. However, in regards to the testing regime, once again, we have to look at this carefully, because when we look at international standards, let's just take, for example, the time frame in which persons are expected to recover. The US was 5 days, and now we see the UK now reverting back to 5 days like the US. Our local authorities here, the CMO, did hold fast to 10 days. We're not sure if that's going to switch, but as it pertains to the regime, the testing regime, and how that would impact students and teachers, we're still unclear. But we also have to look closely at the recovery time that's being portrayed and how that will interfere with both teachers and students who may have contracted the virus or are to contract the virus at any time. I know persons within the community have their own personal concerns, parents particularly, about the testing. I'm sure teachers have their concerns as well, because they are the ones who would be expected to administer the test. The minister did say, however, that the most less invasive test will be used, so we continue to wait. But I do think holistically, as a territory, persons are pleased and will be excited to have students back in face-to-face sessions.
Indeed, and as you mentioned, the whole controversial aspect of the return to face-to-face was the announcement by the minister, basically stating that there will be somewhat of a testing regime for all students returning back to school, basically to say if once you are coming through those doors, the persons would be tested via rapid test to determine whether they were present, whether the COVID-19 virus is present within their system. And basically go from there. But your point basically is to touch on those persons who probably would have contracted COVID-19 and then to test, but I'm not sure exactly. I guess we will all have to wait on Wednesday to see who would be tested, whether it will be situations where persons who previously tested positive will be tested to re-enter the school, or whether it will be a situation where certain grades be tested.
Right.
I guess we all have to wait on Wednesday to see what basically happens.
Viewers, continuing on the local scene, Territorial Representative, the Honorable Shreen Flax Charles, who is also the Junior Minister for Trade and Economic Development, represented the territory of the Virgin Islands at a recently held OECS Multisector meeting on Omicron, and now recognizing, of course, the need for, as they say, all hands on deck in the light of the unprecedented increase in COVID-19 cases related to the arrival of the most recent variant within the OECS. The Organization of Eastern Caribbean Commission convened an extraordinary virtual multi-section meeting on COVID-19 and the Omicron variant. This was held on January 11th to consider the public health protocols, relevant supplies, and health system capacities in light of the experiences that have already seen in other parts of the globe. Now, the meeting chair, OECS Director General Dr. Dr. Jules, expressed the need for all stakeholders to be aligned and proactive in the fight against the pandemic. Dr. Jules also called for the multi-sectorial approach to increase the effectiveness of our interventions and reinforce support of the CARFRA as the leading public health agency within the regional efforts. It was said, and I quote, "Every sector, public and private, every business, every community, every family, and every individual should be aware of, prepare for, and continue to take appropriate action during this wave, because together is the best way for us to face this challenge, minimize fallout, and of course continue to thrive." Now, the meeting included representation from regional OECS ministers in the fields of tourism, health, and education, as well as representatives from the Caribbean Public Health Agency, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the Caribbean Disaster Management Agency, and the Caribbean community. Participants of the meeting were provided with a thorough briefing of the state of COVID-19 in our region, especially with the new Omicron variant threat by the Caribbean Public Health Agency, as well as the health unit at the OECS Commission. Executive Director Dr. Joy St. John presented on the realities of the pandemic with the introduction of the new variant, and really provided some key recommendations, viewers, to help tackle the virus across various varying sectors. The meeting also received critical updates on the impact, concerns, and needs within education, tourism, and the economy by the relevant units at the OECS Commission. Now, interventions were made by Acting Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Authority, Mr. Neil Walters, on the impact of the new variant on tourism, as well as the Acting Deputy Director of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank Research Department, Shreen Thompson, on its impact on the economy. The ministers for tourism, education, and health present, as well as the permanent secretaries, chief medical officers, are really essentially all stakeholders who have a part to play as it pertains to the opportunity to engage in discussion on the issues raised, and provided some extremely critical recommendations for consideration by the OECS heads of government during the 71st meeting of the OECS Authority to be held later this month. Now, Kamal, as we see the Honorable Minister of Flax, Shreen Flax Charles, that is representing the territory at this very critical meeting, more and more we see leaders across the region meeting and really putting their heads together in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm sure as the pandemic continues to evolve, or perhaps in some cases hopefully gets better, we will continue to see that level of partnership across the Eastern Caribbean, which I think is absolutely important.
And necessary indeed. Moving on to our final story before the commercial break, where we see the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force has confirmed the sudden death of a male in his early 30s, which occurred on the afternoon of Sunday, January 16th. But this was confirmed in an invited statement from the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, which said that so far the death of the East End resident has not revealed any suspicions. But the police said, and I quote, "The police can confirm the sudden death of a 31-year-old male of Vanterpool Estate reported about 4 p.m. yesterday. Investigations so far indicate there is nothing suspicious in this death," end quote. But more information to come as this story develops. Well, viewers, up next, 2 businesses fined and ordered to close following COVID-19 breaches. And Legal Fraternity celebrates the opening of the 2022 law year. But these are more stories after a word from our sponsors.
Is business slow? Cash flow down? Hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your present marketing and messaging strategies. Allow our team of experts to create a personalized ad that sets your business apart from all the rest. This could be your business or event. So, what are you waiting for? Contact our marketing team at 284media@cctbvi.com. Advertising with us works.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a brand new season of The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman, a show poised to help guide modern-day men into 21st century distinguished gentlemen. It doesn't always involve suits and, bow ties, but raw, real-life lessons that translate to grounded, community-minded, well-rounded men. This season, I'm taking you on an entirely different journey, from chefs to dancers, philanthropists, communications specialists, and much more. I'm heading outside in the field to share the journey of some of the BVI's best and brightest men. From East End to West End, Borgingada, Justin Lake, not forgetting Anigata. Our Virgin Islands gentlemen are doing the damn thing, and I'm so proud. Get ready to reason, reflect, and redirect. We are the movers and shakers of this generation, and we ain't afraid to show it. The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman, Season 3 by yours truly, Ron Grant, raising a generation of greatness.
Well, welcome back, viewers. Well, Peg Legs and Mambo Nightclub and Bar were both fined $1,000 each and ordered to close for breaching COVID-19 protocols on Friday. But this was confirmed by the Chief Environmental Health Officer, Mr. Lionel Michael, who told 284 News that the work was executed by the Social Distancing Task Force. Well, he said Peg Legs, which is located in Naniki, was fined and ordered to close for violating the mask-wearing protocols. Well, Mambo Nightclub and Bar, which is located on Main Street, was fined for violating both mask-wearing and social distancing protocols and ordered to close. Was speaking on the 2 incidents, Chief Environmental Health Officer Mr. Michael stressed on the need for businesses to enforce and adhere to COVID-19 suppression measures as the territory continues to battle with the present COVID-19 spike. Well, he said, and I quote, Well, in this pandemic, BVI businesses have to be even more concerned about complying with public health protocols. The Ministry of Health and Social Development is aiming at a drastic reduction of the current increase in COVID-19 cases and to prevent and control any further increase in cases, end quote. But the Chief Environmental Health Officer also disclosed that in excess of 300 individuals have been ticketed for violations to date. Around, obviously, this year is was somewhat expected in terms of following the order given from the Minister of Health to the Chief Environmental Health Officer to ramp up operations, increase staff size, go there and patrol, and find these persons who are in breach of these COVID-19 measures to help curb the present spike we have in the territory. Presently, we would have seen the last date, which was on Friday, basically stating that some 1,200 cases are in the 1,200 active cases now exist in the territory. I'm obviously sure that that number would have shifted since. But basically what we see now is somewhat is a decline.
Yes,
and
we
that
see
obviously
a number of recoveries.
And due to the large quantity of recoveries, and that ultimately obviously extends to what businesses are doing and what the citizens and residents of the territory are doing basically.
Well, the task of the Environmental Health Department is by no means an easy task. I do think since the onset of the pandemic, they have been thrust into a high demand, of course, working with very little infrastructure as it pertains to staffing. But I do think that it is imperative they continue to implement their measures, because essentially I think if persons and businesses are not policing themselves and making sure that measures are implemented, then that's where we're going to see quite a bit of a follow-up. But what's interesting though is residents who are business owners are also taking to social media, of course, since the onset of publishing this story. Persons did come out and say, as business owners, they too are having a very difficult time policing residents who come to these establishments and making sure that they are adhering to protocols. Residents, many of them, are not adhering to the protocols when they go to these businesses. So we see where there's quite a difficult time between business owners and residents. Of course, many of them wanting to stay open, wanting to receive clients and business, but then the patrons of the business are giving somewhat of a very difficult time.
And I totally understand. I totally agree with what a number of the businesses have been stating. You would see if you go to several bars or several places where sometimes you see the staff basically asking a customer to just put up the mask, sanitize. And some persons do comply, but others, there are those 1% of individuals who basically want to live life how they want to live life, and no one can basically tell them how to live life. And those are the persons basically posing a threat to the businesses and the establishments, who as a result of such then have to suffer being fined and in some cases closed as well.
Shut down. Very unfortunate. We do continue to wish the business community and our residents, of course, the best of safety. Moving along, viewers, as was stated earlier in our a few weeks ago in our newscast, the start of the year, that's the legal year, began with a church service at the New Testament Church of God International Worship Center before transitioning to a virtual ceremony under the theme, the OECS Reimagining the Justice System in the Era of COVID-19 and Beyond, which of course featured an address by Her Ladyship, the Honorable Dame Janice P.M. Piera. In addition to that, Attorney General Don J. Smith offered remarks on behalf of the Attorney Generals within the OECS jurisdiction and the Bar of the Virgin Islands. Now, while other remarks were made by members from the inner and outer bars of the jurisdictions, Justice Piera, in her remarks, questioned what the justice system will resemble in the next 5 to 10 years. She noted that it is, and I quote, "It is, I think, fair to say that as COVID-19 lingers on and even beyond the pandemic, digitally driven courts will be critical to the continued administration of justice." She noted that the courts around the world have arrived at the conclusion that digitally operated courts and services are here to stay, as the administration of justice through the digital platform was a welcomed transition as COVID-19 pandemic forced the jurisdictional system into survival mode. Now, Attorney General Don J. Smith during her remarks, questioned the direction of the jurisdiction, where it will go. As in, she said, for some years now, we, the legal profession in the Eastern Caribbean, have pushed the boundaries of the practice of law and dispute resolution. Most recently, we have adopted to remote access for the conduct of case management, conferences, hearings, and other interactions in the dispute resolution space as we have braved extreme natural disasters and a global pandemic. My question today is simply, where do we go from here? Now, the Attorney General congratulated the Chief Justice on her steady and visionary leadership and also congratulated the ECSE bench and bar for their resolve to follow her into the digital age and urge them not to downplay the significance of the steps taken thus far. Now, viewers, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court was established in 1967 by the West Indies Associated State Supreme Court, Order number 223 of 1967. The ECSE is a superior court of record for the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, including, of course, 6 independent states, Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, and 3 British overseas territories, namely Anguilla, British Virgin Islands, and Montserrat. It has unlimited jurisdiction in each member state. Kamal, as the legal year, the new law year takes center stage, one of the key factors that we continue to hear over and over is the transition, and this transition does not seem to be going anywhere, and that is to the digital online court interfaces where courts are now being held digitally. Some persons are not quite keen on this new era, but we do see where many of the persons, particularly Don J. Smith, Attorney General, and Justice Pierre, is saying that it's probably more than likely here to stay.
Indeed, and I did listen to that speech from Dame Pierre, basically stating that obviously it's a new norm. You would have seen a number of e-litigation measures, and as she would have said, they're trying to update the portal where more cases are brought to the online platform. And as you would have seen in the BVI, where a number of court cases would have been heard virtually, it's commenced since last year, obviously, yes, with the pandemic and the closures and stuff. But as she did say that even with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a situation where a number of cases, more cases were cases in 2021 were to the levels of 2020 and 2019 in terms of even before the pandemic.
Yeah,
so
quite backdated.
Which means basically that, you know, even though we are transitioning to online with the COVID-19 impact, you know, cases are still being processed and seen on the virtual platform, therefore resulted in numbers and cases being had, basically, as opposed to a pause in justice. Therefore, there is a backlog, but in terms of this COVID situation making that backlog worse, it's actually trying to ease some of those cases and ease the backlog overall.
Kamal, I do think that the justice system, particularly here in the British Virgin Islands, should be extremely, they should be applauded for the very quick, I would say, transition to online court hearings. Of course, there were some hiccups and there continue to be glitches, but the very swift transition that really allowed court cases to be effectively heard, I think they should be commended. Viewers, up next, a total active COVID-19 cases in the BVI on the decline, thankfully, with some 473 recoveries reported on Friday. And the total cases, of course, we're going to keep you updated as it pertains to those statistics. All this and so much more after a word from our sponsors. You're watching 284 News.
So you're saying I can ask this cat any question?
The cat is connected to the computer. You just type in the question, it will read his mind. There the answer comes.
You're the man! I've been looking for this for weeks.
Brilliant Hands and Minds tutoring services, one-on-one tutorials in math and English, intense homework assistance, academic enrichment, school projects, effective communication and public speaking development, sign language for adults and children on Saturdays only. Registered with the Virgin Islands High School Certificate Program, Brilliant Hands and Minds can help you too. Offering intense curriculum-based training to help you or your loved ones get their high school diploma. It's time to make your family's education a #1 priority. Hurry, space is limited. Brilliant Hands and Minds Learning Center. We are the trained education professionals.
Welcome back, viewers. Well, active positive COVID-19 cases are seemingly on the decline in the British Virgin Islands after some 473 recoveries were reported on Friday, January 14th, to reduce the total active cases down to 1,220 in the BVI. But this is according to information presented in the latest COVID-19 epidemiological summary from the Ministry of Health. Well, on Wednesday, January 12th, some 1,387 cases were reported in the BVI, a number that declined the following day to 1,305 active cases. Fast forward to Friday, the new report stated that the BVI recorded some 308 new active cases, a number that was overshadowed by the 473 recoveries, which resulted in a reduction of 165 cases. Well, on Tortola, there were at the time 963 cases, Virgin Gorda 202, Anegada 52, and Yospan Dyke 3. Hospitalizations total remained at the time at 16, while the total COVID-19 related deaths stood at 42 following the 2 additional recent deaths. Ron, obviously those numbers would have changed by now. That last statistic report was on Friday, the 14th. Now today, obviously, 3 days since then, I'm sure that those numbers would change, but hopefully once that new bulletin comes out, I'm sure it should probably come up between today and tomorrow. Hopefully it's a reduction from that 1,200 mark. Hopefully it's under 1,000.
Well, Kamal, one of the most positive things about the recent surge and update coming in from the Ministry of Health is that we have, though in some cases slow, we are seeing a reduction. We are seeing many cases recovered, which we are absolutely thankful for in this present state. With 3 days having passed, yes, we're looking forward to hopefully a significant decrease in cases, and of course recently we should be receiving an update in numbers, but again I do have to revert back to the recovery period, where there seems to be some disparities in how long persons should be staying inside to recover. And of course we're seeing now where persons are being told once they're not experiencing symptoms that they don't necessarily have to test. Testing upon coming out of the isolation and quarantine period is not necessarily being done. So I do think those different varying protocols would allow us to see a continued decrease in cases.
Yeah, hopefully that is the case. The acting chief medical officer, Dr. Ronald Georges, would have made comments on such last stakeholders meeting last week, where he would have said that they're looking to basically decide on what is his stance to take here in the BVI. We've seen in the United States where there are a 5-day recovery after testing positive once you have no symptoms. UK has no transition to that as well. Here in the BVI, we're using 10 days. Prior to that, it was 10 days, and then you were tested afterwards. Yes, to see whether you were negative. But no, according to the acting chief medical officer, after the 10-day duration, you're free to, once you're fully vaccinated and you have no symptoms, basically you're free, you would receive your leaflet stating that you're fully recovered, and obviously having to wear a mask for the additional 4 days or stuff once you're around persons. But previously that was a testing regime where then you had to be tested afterwards. Now we're hearing that they may consider 7 days and then test after the 7th day using an anti-rapid test. But the health authorities here are just working out the kinks to basically to come to a empirical decision basically of the facts and the information to see what's best here for the BVI, because it may be good for the US, it may be good for the UK, but not necessarily good for the BVI. And I'm sure that the health authorities obviously are considering all the data at hand, yes, to come to the best conclusion and the best decision here when it comes to COVID in the BVI.
And not because it's decided on means that it's not going to change. We've seen that quite often. Even though measures are put in place, they continue to evolve and they continue to change. So we just have to exercise some patience. Viewers, that is all the time we have. But of course, not all the content. We have so much more on our website, 284media.com. Of course, check out our social media handles, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, Facebook. We are 284 Media out of Tortola in the Virgin Islands, your source for honest and impartial news. It's always a pleasure. Have a happy Monday. I'm Ron Grant.
Viewers, I'm Kamal here, and thank you so much for joining us. Have a great Monday.